All right, well, welcome everybody for that first panel of Streaming Media West 2017. My name is Gautier. Despite what my baby face looks like, I'm not here on a high school internship. I'm actually the VP Sales for Streamroot, a WebRTC peer-to-peer video company. And we're going to have a panel today talking about the evolution of the landscape of the CDN business. How can you manage performance and cost in a timely fashion? So if you look back a few years ago, everybody only had one CDN provider, and that was the way to work. You would do an RFP, you would select your vendor, and go with that vendor for 1 or 2 years. Then we started having the emergence of CDN load balancing. So you started having multiple vendors. In the beginning, you were doing load balancing manually based on either cost or performances. And we're starting having platforms that allows you to do that automatically, like CDX's, Nice People at Work, Conviva, and so on. And you started to have, as a best practice, to have multiple vendors, and you were able to load balance based on performance, but also based on cost, to have the perfect ratio between good efficiency and good cost saving. And as of 2017, we're seeing on top of that, that is still the best practice in the CDN delivery industry, we're seeing new technology come up and new platform come up. In Europe, we're seeing a lot of platforms going back to their own architecture and using outside CDN load balancing as an overflow mechanism. We're seeing new technology like new version of multicast, like the peer-to-peer video streaming. So the goal of that session is basically to get some testimony and some feedback around all our panelists about what is their current architecture today, what was the path that led them to build that architecture, to select that specific architecture. Then we'll talk a little bit about the stressful part, what are they focusing on today, what keeps them up at night, what are they really focusing in 2017. And we'll finish the last part around where do they see that industry going into the next 5 years. What do they believe their architecture is going to look like in 5 years? And then we'll have a small session for Q&A. Okay? So I'm going to ask the panelists, each of them, to introduce themselves, and then we'll kick off with the session.
Okay, perfect. I'm Rodrigo Violante. I'm the CTO in Televisa. I'm in charge of the OTT business. We have created our own OTT platform. We started with a vendor, but then we migrate to our own OTT. And we've been in business for almost 5 years.
I'm Flavio. I work as engineer on the video department at the New York Times. I basically work across all the different initiatives on both on-demand and live streaming. We are now focusing some of the efforts in audio as well, so we do have some projects around like podcasts, so I've been involved in like both the different initiatives in audio and video.
I'm Zach Shenker, Principal Video Engineer at CBS Interactive, working on the Central Video Technology Group, where we build shared products, services, and workflows for the 25 plus different businesses at CBSI that are delivering video online.
I'm Ryan Korte. I lead the architecture and engineering team for the content and media division at Level 3, which is now CenturyLink. As of yesterday, we made that acquisition close, so part of the bigger CenturyLink team now. Been there for quite a long time, about 17 plus years in the content and media space.
Perfect. All right, so let's kick off with the first question. We'd like to know a little bit more about your current delivery architecture. What platform do you use for each of the service that you guys offer? And if you can walk us through a little bit the path that led you there. So what was the pain point? What was the test that you did that worked or didn't work that led you to that specific architecture? And we're going to start with you, Rodrigo.
Okay, so basically when I joined Televisa, we started with a company that had an end-to-end solution. And of course, we had a really bad experience. That's why we migrated to our own platform. But our biggest pinpoint was one that we depend 100% of a vendor, and that's never good if your core business is going to be video delivery. The second part was that everything was, of course, a really big deal if we want to change. So we started making that change. At that moment, we were on our own data center and started migrating to the cloud when we started building our own architecture. We had Televisa had, as a group, a whole deal with one CDN vendor. I don't want to name it. And we have our storage there and our delivery. And as our content start growing, the storage, we have around 1 petabyte right now. This CDN had a limitation, and we couldn't have more storage there, so we migrate everything to Amazon S3. And at that moment, we started realizing that our CDN wasn't that good. We started analyzing that we have caching ratio of 50% or less, which caused our Amazon S3 transfers to increase hugely. We were almost spending the same amount on CDN that we were on Amazon S3 transfer, and of course a really crappy experience on our users. So then we migrated to another CDN provider where we got 90+%, and now we are fully based on the cloud, in a normal cloud architecture. And right now, our biggest point, we want to migrate to a multi-CDN architecture. But if your storage is in this case on Amazon S3, and you have multi-CDN storage, multi-CDN option, you're gonna spend a lot of money on content delivery, to your CDNs. So if you have 5 CDNs, the math starts multiplying, and if we are on this micro payment service where we charge less than $5, so we have to be really cautious on that part. So we migrate to another option on storage where we have just pay per gigabyte, we don't pay per transfer, and that's helping us for the multi-CDN part.
Very good. Thank you. Flavio?
So for the times, we basically have 2 different stacks, one for on-demand and another one for live. Like as Rodrigo said, last year, we went to the cloud as well. So part of the goal for this year is so we can shut down our data centers. So this is kind of like a effort for the whole company to move the projects and the websites to the cloud. A bunch of our microservices for encoding and publishing are on Amazon, but now we are moving towards some of the Google Cloud Platform products. We are relying on just one CDN for spreading the content around the world, and we have our own origin servers, so we do on-the-fly packaging in our deployments. But for live, we rely on a direct connect for sending the ImpactTS segments. So basically, our whole stack is focused on HLS delivery. So the focus for both live and on-demand is to deliver HLS. We didn't experiment with ImpactDash yet, but we have plans to do that next year. But in terms of CDNs, we basically use just one for caching the whole content for both live and on-demand.
Great. So currently today we're using a single CDN vendor with storage in-network in that CDN vendor, but we're certainly at the start of the journey towards sort of exploring what multi-CDN means for reliability and failover, for improved sort of experience and QoS. There's certainly been sort of a lot of pain points with sort of relying on a single CDN vendor for everything.
Very good. And Ryan, a little bit of a different question for you, because obviously you work with many different platforms. So I would say, what's your current focus? I mean, we know that there's been the CenturyLink acquisition literally yesterday, but from a CDN standpoint, what are the main focus on the platform as of today?
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, there's a lot of interaction between what these guys are talking about and where they're headed. And the multi-CDN strategy is obviously a big part of what we've been talking about for many years as Level 3 is. We want as much of your traffic as we can take and put on the network, but we want you to be really smart about it as well. As if we have a problem or another CDN has a problem, or you don't have a delivered path, make sure that we have all the backup options and make sure that we can make that work. So multi-CDN has definitely been on the target and on the radar for a long time. Getting deeper down into networks is also an important thing. Level 3 probably approaches it differently than some CDNs, I would agree, because I'd probably suppose, because we have a network and we kind of surround things, right? We can kind of instead of going deep into and deploying deeply in the network, we can actually deeply connect and surround to these different platforms. So we use our network as a strength in order to get there. And so we've looked a lot at that and expanding globally. I mean, most of this is global traffic now as well. So when we talk about, what part of the country are you in? It's what part of the world are you in? How deeply are you connected? How do you get those connections? And how can you push it out? So a lot on quality. Mm-hmm. We agree the multi-CDN is huge, and you better, one other piece of it is that, I expect that, there are companies out there that are measuring, and the customers are definitely managing quality and measuring quality. But we're also kind of on a second mission of internally measuring our quality. And I'll say it's a trust and verify mechanism of, do we trust all the quality metrics? Do they match to what the CDN says? Or is there something else that we can help work with our partners, work with our customers on to say, that doesn't match up with our data, let's go after it. So totally agree with the multi-CDN strategy. That's probably a whole side.
Very good. So part of that CDN multi-strategy is being able to make the right decision, the right choice at the right time. And it's where, the different tools, either in-house or for outside vendor, that allows you to make the right decision and make an educated decision is really important. So coming back to you, Rodrigo, how do you today measure performances? What are the key metrics that you focus on? And as you were mentioning, we're going into a multi-CDN strategy. What are going to be the key indicator you're going to look at to make that decision?
So basically right now we measure everything. We measure bitrate, buffering, rebuffer, what type of network you are, what ISP, what CDN you're using. We try to get all this information. And we are still debating if we want to go with a provider. There are a lot of options out there, but we are going more into building our own platform. To be really honest, we think we could handle a little bit better the experience. It's definitely a big challenge, but I think with machine learning right now, there's a lot that we can do and start, telling, hey, this user has a better experience through this CDN on this ISP, on this type of network. And we start making that decisions. We want to make that decisions based on, all machine learning with a dynamic manifest approach. So I think that's a really good solution for us right now. There are so many options that some offer, they give you the manifest, they give you a dynamic manifest, but they always serve one segment from their CDN, which I don't like that approach, but it's transparent for the user. It all depends, in reality, what are you doing with your users, and then you can take, a better solution, I guess.
Very good. And same question for you, Flavio. Today, how do you measure if you're doing a good job? I mean, how is the organization measuring that you're doing a good job? What are the tools that they're using to do that?
Yeah, so basically we decided to integrate with one analytics tool this year. Since we were doing like this CDN migration, like shutting down the data centers and going to the cloud, we wanted to make sure that we were not like hurting the users. So basically, we were looking at the rebuffering rates and the startup time, which, by the way, it's still not good, at least for us. We have a lot of room for improvement on the startup time. So we are also looking at dynamic manifest generation based on where the user is trying to watch our videos. It's interesting to see that when we have breaking news videos, the experience, like the quality of experience of our users is actually better, and that's because they're hitting the cache more often. So I wonder, like, how can we push the segments for like all the edge servers so we can keep this like the same performance as the ones we have when we have breaking news. So it's like we are like all of these changes were made during this year, so it's all new, it's all fresh. We are still looking at all the pain points, all the things that we can improve, and one of like the main goals for us is to improve the startup time by the beginning of next year.
Very good.
Yeah, I think what's really happening in our industry now is the expectation from the user of quality of experience is that they'll really get that seamless experience every time. It is annoying to the user when they have to wait too long for an ad or a video to start, when they have to deal with a rebuffer event, and that's really then when you're risking losing your users, losing your revenue and your impressions and anything else like that. So I think really it's something that's evolving for us, but we're certainly moving towards a lot of prioritization around being able to monitor every stream, being able to really focus on sort of measuring from the client side what that experience is that the user is having. And then also moving towards sort of putting appropriate tooling in place to ensure that we have ways of understanding what's happening with all the different pieces of our back-end infrastructure, the delivery networks and CDNs, and all the other pieces of the stack, so that we can also be very reactive to any error rates or performance issues that we discover from the client side, so that we can work towards quick resolution of any issues.
Perfect. And Ryan, same for you. I mean, I guess knowing what the performance is of a CDN is and the experience that you're delivering to your user is really important. So can you walk us a little bit from the CDN standpoint about what key metrics and the tools you're using to measure that you're doing a good job?
Yeah, it's easy. Their key metrics are ours, right? And but go through this. I mean, I kind of want to make the interesting point is Rodrigo started with bit rate, and then Flavio mentioned different things around startup times and others, and then Zach didn't give me a good example, a hard concrete one, but he's probably got another 2 or 3 that he's got in his pocket that we're talking about. And so when we look at it, those are the ones we have to measure up to. And I think as a CDN, it's a bit where we need to get to standards bodies, and we need to get to standard way to think about this and standard measures, so that we're talking about the same things. Because a lot of times when we talk to our customers about rebuffering, the way they measure it and how they look at it and really the math that goes behind it is actually different between them. It's not a thing called rebuffering metric that I can talk to 2 different customers about and have the same answer on. And I think it's super important. I think the other thing to mention and to take into context when we talk about quality and networking, and this is obviously a lot about streaming and video streaming, but a CDN is there for a lot of other reasons too. And so when we look at it, we also look at impact of other traffic and other traffic profiles and events and things like that. We're obviously sizing and trying to make our network big enough for any event that comes on it, whether it's a gaming download or a live sporting event or a big, huge news event. So when you take all this into context, you really need to think about how does your network operate at scale and adjust when you have those events to make a streaming performance super reliable, even in adverse conditions.
Very good. And I'd like to dig a little bit on the cost aspect of things, because obviously the theme of that panel is broadcast, amazing broadcast experience with keeping in mind the cost aspect. So when doing those load balancing decisions, when selecting the vendors, such large organization as you guys, are you mainly focusing on the performances and performances come first? Or are you able to have a mix of cost optimization as well as delivery? Like what is your train of thought when you're making such decisions?
Of course, cost is always comes into account, but for me, the most important is the cost of acquisition a new user, of the cost of losing a user. So I'm not at this point so much worried about cost of CDN transfers, cloud. I think that over time we can reduce it with nice caching, nice strategy. But losing a user, if a user has one bad experience, getting that user back to your platform is almost impossible. So yeah, that's my biggest concern right now, focusing 100% on the user. If I got the user figured out and they got this engagement and they love our platform, I can at some point, have a better rate, lower rates on anything. So
very good.
Yeah, basically the same for the times. We our main focus being on the video technology team is to be able to deliver video with the same quality as our journalism. So the main focus is to improve the experience and have the better experience possible. But we also look at the costs and but it's kind of like a second problem. We are now focusing in trying to improve the way we serve videos. We are also trying to improve the way we deliver the videos in like mobile devices, like we're doing 360 videos. We are like looking at other mediums, like working with VR and all of the other stuff. So for now, like we are most focused on improving the quality than looking at the cost of the platforms.
Yeah, I think it always has to be a balance. I think it's performance is obviously critical. We always want to give that user a good experience so that they stay around and consume our content. Obviously, I think for different types of businesses under the CBSI umbrella, there's always different balancing acts of where they sit on the cost versus sort of performance and how much they're willing to spend to really sort of get the best experience for the user. But really, I think it's for us as a central team, it's also about balancing out how we start to use new technologies, how we can use new codecs like VP9 and HEVC, or approaches to like per title encoding or other techniques that, in addition to multi-CDN, will provide us ways to sort of provide the same or even higher quality video and higher quality video experiences, while also looking at how we can utilize less bandwidth across delivery networks.
And Ryan, a little bit of a different question on the vendor standpoint. We know that there's a race to the lowest price because more people are using CDN and people are becoming more savvy buyers. Does that affect in any way the decision that you're making in terms of R&D, in terms of innovation, knowing that cost is still going to be a deciding factor for customer to purchase? Or do you, on the opposite, find that technology allows you to be more efficient with the architecture and therefore add more value as well as keeping the cost lower?
Well, yeah, we're not quite there probably, but the question around what keeps you up at night, right? That's the question that keeps me up at night. It's actually, the thing that keeps us thinking is as you grow the network, the opportunity to be inefficient is as equal to being efficient. So if you think about what I mean by that, as we grow traffic, if we don't understand how the service provider networks, the downstream eyeball networks are architected, we can actually make decisions that actually make it worse and make it less efficient. If we understand that and we do a good job, then we make it more efficient and our cost hopefully comes down as well and performance goes up. And so, yes, we are constantly looking to make our network more efficient with a quality level as well. And so, the most efficient way to do this would be centralize it, and the quality would be really terrible, right? So as we get deeper, like I said, what keeps me up and keeps us thinking is how do you make it efficient and cost effective, which are probably aligned. And I think there's going to be times when, obviously, certain eyeball networks make a change. These networks are also adaptive and changing every day, right? And most of the, CDNs, whether you build your own, buy, have your own network and architect your own, there's so many dynamics going on underneath that you control and don't control. You're reacting to them a lot. So that's the big part of it. React to it, make it as efficient as you can, measure where you're inefficient, and then make it efficient again.
All right. So let's switch to another topic, which is kind of the ugly topic. What keeps you up at night, guys? What is the main concern you have the network? Why are the things that makes people call you at 3 a.m. saying, we need your help right now? Like, what is the main focus when you wake up in the middle of the night?
Honestly, I don't wake up anymore. I used to have a lot of that. But since we migrate to the cloud, we change CDNs, we did a lot of the core changes that need to be done. Like, we invest a lot on the back end. I can sleep like a baby, so here I'm happy. So thank God I don't need that anymore.
Yeah, we had a bunch of issues with the live streaming stack for the presidential debates, and I needed to stay at the office for doing some configurations around the levels of the HLS and everything else, and even the signal that was coming. They were changing the inputs all the time, 720, 1080, bit rates, everything. So all of these were minimal, and I think this was one of the pain points we had. But now that we switched to a more like automated way to create live streaming events. And now that we are also relying on the cloud and on the CDN, I think we are doing really well. So since the beginning of 2017, we've been having frequent live streaming events with no issues. So I'm also sleeping really well.
Very good.
Can I add something?
Yes, sure. Go ahead. Rodrigo.
Yeah, on live events, it's really important. I mean, there are technologies where you can pre-warm the platform. You can, say, hey, I'm going to get this amount of traffic, notifying your CDNs. Like, if you really have that communication and you do it like you do previously, you know what you have to do. Like, there will never be an issue unless, Amazon goes down or some major thing that you cannot control. I think that helps a lot for the technical team to sleep.
Yeah,
like
still on that, we do have like a playbook. So yeah, like everyone that wants to set up a live streaming event, like he or she goes through this like playbook and notifications, like for the CDN providers. So when we have like a really big event, we try to notify everyone. So we kind of have like a procedure for this kind of events.
Very good. Zach?
Yeah, I think it's, as video is getting more and more complicated, we're adding more pieces to the workflow, as we're sort of, doing migrations from data center into cloud, as we're adding things like DRM, multi-CDN, all of these are sort of adding additional components to the critical playback chain for every user and for every view. So, I think it's really about, having insights into all of these systems, understanding how your server-side ad insertion system's performing, understanding, what the impact is all the way through your chain and being able to quickly identify, where and what pieces are responsible when you do encounter performance issues and outages.
Very good. Ryan, same question. For this one time, you get the
This one
same
time
question.
I get the same question. Honestly, I'm glad these guys sleep well at night, right? But honestly, the CDN platform for us, just to kind of comment on that part of it, it is one big constant live event. I mean, it's one event for one customer, and then the next hour a different one, and it's constant. So, I mean, we have a great ops team. Hopefully, they help these teams sleep at night that we can do our part on it. The interesting part that, for me, the other part that does keep me up at night, like I said, efficiency versus inefficiency, yes, that one as well. But the other one is more around control theory. And control theory goes back to the whole multi-CDN strategy, right? All of our customers are talking about it. And if you really look inside of what a CDN does, we actually use multi-CDN strategy within our own network every day. We decide to send things to these nodes or those nodes, and they might be running one set of software or another set of software, and it's really not one holistic CDN at all times. It's actually many things inside there that we're pushing traffic to. And when I say control theory, what I talk about or what I think about is, our ability to switch things so fast that they're out of control rather than keep them in control. And so when you think about control theory, if you spike to 100% and then you immediately shift to 0 and then you go back up 100%, you dial back up and down, it can be really bad for the network. You don't know where the problem's at, the problem's moving, and we're giving that power to our customers. It's great. They're going to be able to control our networks and shift traffic back and forth between CDNs. And I think we're going to see some control theory problems around this, and our networks are going to get hot and then not, and we got a lot to worry about in that regard. So, the thing that we can help with and that we're trying to help with is, here's our data from our CDN, we're collecting it, we're analyzing it, but we're also trying to give it away to our customers and say, here's the data back. Here's our bit rate right now, here's across the markets, here's how we're looking, here's our stats, and working with our customers to give them that. So hopefully that will help some of that piece around it.
Yeah, and I think that, as a customer, that's always something that, we're looking at sort of every CDN to help us provide is, to understand as we're starting to look at how do we steer traffic dynamically to different CDNs, it's really, having that understanding of how a CDN really is performing, from the client metric side, from any sort of QoE experience sort of metric side, but then also really understanding, and the thing that I feel is very opaque with the CDN today is, how are caches operating? When is a cache in a region actually going to be hot? How today do I answer that question of if I'm about to send traffic to CDN A or CDN B, they may be both performing at the edge about the same, but then how do I determine if one's hot and one's cold for that user, which may have a massive impact if the one CDN has to go all the way back to origin.
Yeah.
Very good. All right, so let's switch to that final part and talk a little bit about the future. I mean, we're talking about, in Europe, we're seeing a lot of broadcasters kind of like reverting back to having their own architecture and only using outside vendors for the overflow traffic. We're seeing, obviously, multicast coming back, peer-to-peer for live and on-demand video delivery. So when it comes to us thinking about your architecture within the next 5 years, what do you think that architecture is going to look like for each of you guys? And is there any particular technology that you're looking at today with, more than curiosity, saying, that might solve many of my issues, if there's any?
So on my end, what we're looking at is, of course, a multi-CDN, probably building our own CDN infrastructure in some data centers. Of course, this makes a really big investment to start building your own CDNs. We're looking in being able to push our content before it appears on the platform to all our CDN distribution. That way it won't hit our origin servers. We also are expecting that if there's no if we cannot be on every single CDN on every single ISP because of the cost. On the peer-to-peer, there's something that you can do local net peer-to-peer. So that makes it kind of attractive to have a local CDN without really making the investment there. So that's what I'm more looking into the future right now.
Very good. Flavio?
Yeah, I guess that the main decision for us to deploy in our own origin servers and the on-the-fly packager was so we can have the freedom to try to do multi-CDN as well. And I think that in the future, we are going to be able to do some tests around peer-to-peer networks, especially for the type of content that we broadcast. So usually we do like breaking news events for live, and like every time we have one event in the world, we also have a bunch of videos, so we can see a lot of spikes on our analytics tool. And I wonder how useful and how good is to do a peer-to-peer approach for these cases.
I think overall, we are looking at sort of moving towards the cloud and really more out of sort of existing data centers, just because of the sort of ubiquity of compute and storage and the lowering of cost and all the other benefits that sort of moving to cloud provides. And then sort of in working with sort of CDNs at our scale, and particularly getting the flexibility to send traffic to different CDNs and really make CDNs fight on a performance basis for our business, I think starts to give us, as a publisher, a lot more leverage in negotiations and pricing of delivery. And then sort of, in addition to that, it's sort of then looking at really how can we get closer to the last mile, as you were saying, Ryan. It's like, how do we get deeper into these ISP networks and utilize caching that might be even closer to customers, which I think becomes even more critical as we talk about, incredibly high traffic events. We do events like the Super Bowl and other, large sporting events and large entertainment events that, have very significant amounts of the US sort of internet capacity being used up by streaming these events. That really, it then becomes a question for me of, with all these acquisitions of CDNs by ISPs, is it going to get to a world where I'm going to have to go to each ISP to really start to buy the best access to their network and their customers, or will any approaches like open caching and sort of other things down that sort of line provide me access into that last mile? And I think then combined with peer-to-peer is sort of another strategy to really add on to that. But I think there with peer-to-peer, particularly in the US, there are still a lot of sort of customer perception concerns about it. You know, what will customers think about, you know, publishers using their bandwidth, which in some regions may be limited or capped if you're on cellular, you know, to offset your delivery cost and to improve the experience, hopefully.
Yeah, so, you know, from a CDN provider perspective and a network operator, it's an interesting place. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, I think the caching part of it's simple. We kind of have that down. We can tune it. We can get better. We can get, you know, from 50 to 90% cache ratios and do all this stuff. I think that's important. But you know, we've said this for a long time. Having a network and understanding the network is actually more important than the caching architecture in a lot of ways. And so, you know, what we're working on is more tightly coupling, you know, our internet backbone, the BGP routes that we've got, all the data we've got about how that shifts, what's going on with DNS infrastructures and how we localize that traffic. Because if you don't know where to send it at the client side, then it really doesn't work, right? I mean, and so when you start thinking about what we're trying to do over the next 4 to 5 years is actually more like, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, more tightly coupled with the routed infrastructure to understand it so well that it gets to the best place to serve it. Now, are we deep enough? I don't know. Is anybody deep enough? I don't know that answer, but at least I'm getting to the most optimal point without having to do a lot of work to understand if I did after the fact. I want to get there, you know, that's our goal, to understand that we hit the optimal point in the first try, reliably.
Very good. All right, guys, so we have a few minutes left, and it's the time to open to the floor for questions. We don't have mic around, so yeah, you can shout your question and repeat those in the mic for the live streaming, and we'll take it from there. Go ahead.
So you're talking about, in theory, CDN optimization, multi-CDN. So Ryan, level 3 is tried to maintain good peering relationships, but of course it's always a contract, and there have been some hiccups there. What approaches do you guys take to proactively seeing and preventing a peering gotcha, and instead preemptively switching the CDN using your multi-CDN approach prior to running into a peering bandwidth problem?
Yeah, so,
Very good. So Ryan, just before you answer, I'm going to repeat the question.
Yeah,
Sorry, for people on the live streaming. So the question, if I understood properly, is with CDN, you can have some local peering issues that happen to time. So the question is that with that CDN load balancing approach and you coming from the CDN side, what are the mechanisms you're trying to put in place to be proactive regarding potential peering issues?
Yeah, and I think obviously there's peering agreements, and the agreements have augmentation rules and all that. It's keeping ahead of those more than anything else, right? So there's the first part of that answer where you would say, what's your traffic patterns? You look at your customers and you say, how are you going to grow? And what do these events do? And can we handle them? And those peering agreements don't always handle the super large events. And you know, then, right, and they're not always completed in time. And so I think, you know, that is part of it. So that feedback mechanism we were talking about earlier of what is how's our network performing? Where is it, and how, and where is it performing well or not, right? So some of those metrics today, we don't typically feed back to the client side to say, look, use a multi-CDN strategy in this market for this particular HLS type feed or dash feed or MPEG, whatever it might be. We can actually get pretty granular to that level today. And that's a lot of, you know, like I said, taking our log data, correlating that, and pushing that back out to the clients. Now, in order for that to work, the client side or the customer needs to pick that up, or we need to be able to signal that you got to switch at that point in time, and some of that's happening. But again, I come back to, you can also switch way too fast.
Well, but the other part of the problem there is that we have to be sending enough traffic to you to run into the peering problem.
You do.
Unless you are getting feedback from your contracts.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's less about the contracts. We actually look at the actual physical in place and watch the physical. And there's, like I said, there's capacity planning guidelines, augmentation thresholds, and good things that may not happen in time at the end. And if that happens, and I will tell you that I don't expect that to ever stop. It's always going to be happening at some place at some point in time with some peer that we've got as a network provider, or even on our side with somebody trying to connect through us to get to an eyeball we have as CenturyLink, right? I mean, we're obviously in the position as well. And so I think that's a constant. I think it's super important for us to get the metrics to the customer side to allow the multi-CDN. And again, multi-CDN strategies, like we've said, give us as much as you feel. We want more than half, right? Definitely more than half your traffic. We want to be able to handle more than half of everybody's traffic. You should always have a backup.
Yeah, and
we
I
need
think
to be able to support those
I
pieces.
think there as well, there is benefit as well to looking at like real user measurement approaches where, you can be collecting some data from from customers to like test assets on different delivery networks to give you some idea and some picture of, sort of some of the real-time transit and peering sort of problems that may exist on networks that may allow you to do some level of sort of routing before you actually send customers there for your video experience. And I think overall for me, it's about, as a publisher, how do we get to a level of sort of a self-healing system here is, not necessarily always having to have someone, eyeballs on all the data, watching, all the stats and the dashboards and all of that, and manually turning knobs to route traffic around. And certainly on big events, it's critical to really be proactive in those sort of things. But if it's just a normal weeknight, how do we make sure that our systems are self-healing so that we don't get woken up in the middle of the night or have to pull in people out of hours to deal with these issues?
And it's also a fact, no matter who they are, they will go down at some point. And it can be on Sunday night when you have all your audience, everyone goes down and everyone gets hacked. So on that approach, you need to prevent, for example, on Blim, we are OTT platform type of Netflix. If someone got to hack our origin storage and erase everything, you have the risks to be out of business because retranscoding a whole 1 petabyte platform takes 3 weeks, 4 weeks, no matter how much. So that's why we also went to, not just multi-CDN, but multi-origin, have backup, hot backup, stuff like that. So you gotta assume by these days, if someone wants to hack you and someone wants to get in, that what happens if they actually do it? What's your plan B to solve that? Of course, we don't store, the credit card, social security. We just have videos.
No, that's the role of Equifax, and they do an amazing job. Yeah. Perfect. Yeah.
So everyone on the panel, aside from you, Ryan, have sort of talked about CDN as sort of a commodity. They're all kind of the same. If performance is good, but you know what? I want to pit them against each other. So do you look at them just as transit networks per se, or would you ever think about, them as security and DDoS providers? Would you ever give them encoding and let them do more of the M&E workflow? Or do you guys just simply look at them as, it means to the eyeballs?
So I'm just going to repeat the question. So the question is that, are you looking at the CDN providers as commodity provider, like bandwidth provider that's going to do the delivery? Or do you see also value into each of them with value-added services like security, encoding, remux, and all those features?
And depending on their answer, we'll have a conversation after. Thank you.
On my end, at the moment, I'm just looking as video provider. I have seen all the solutions. I have seen, that they do the on-demand, different packaging. But honestly, at the moment, I think if we control this part, the DDoS, everything, I feel more happy than relying on a third party. And if you have multi-CDN approach, then you have, each one has its own implementation, the caching or on, purging that. So, and if they go down, it complicates the equation. Right now, since my staff is not 1,000 engineers like most companies these days, I gotta,
Yeah, I think they're like security and DDoS protection. I see as almost critical to any CDN today. We are going to some of our properties at times will get attacked, and we have to have that both to protect us, but also to protect the CDN network and all of their other customers. So as much as some are selling it as a value add, I see it as a really essential part of the service offering today. But then when it comes more to the media media side, I think it's really, for me, it's about as we're trying to sort of move things towards workflows where we can support sort of agnostic origin, you have multi-CDN and delivery through multiple CDNs, we really want to reduce and remove the intelligence and the smarts in terms of encoding and packaging and other elements from the CDN, because we still need to be able to do that if a CDN goes down. We still need a failover strategy, and we still need to be operational in those scenarios.
Yeah. On my end, it's kind of like a balance, like all of the projects that we've been working on right now, it's like we always talk about like how can we do in a more efficient way. Like as he said, we are less than 15 engineers for the whole video platform, so we need to rely on some other like CDN providers and other companies for help on the delivery of our video. So for example, the transcoding API that we use, it's just a wrapper for some vendors. So we have now, I guess that we have 6 different encoding services available for us, and we can select each one based on the content itself. So for example, if we have a breaking news video that we want to publish as soon as possible, we are going to select the faster encoding service, so we don't actually have our transcoder. And the whole CDN migration project that we are doing across the company is kind of like in a partnership with CDNs and other providers. So even like the DDoS and other attacks, we are looking at them because we do have received a lot of DDoS attacks. And
so Gautier, one quick comment too is I think it's fine to look at a CDN provider as a commodity eyeball network, right? I just hope that people would take away that you can decouple the two things, and that that a service provider isn't just a CDN provider. I mean, we provide, if you took the same approach, you'd say, well, you shouldn't buy waves from your CDN provider, but we sell waves. So I hope people decouple it and they hold us responsible to give them metrics and say we're doing a good job on whatever part we provide, including the CDN, but maybe also encoding, packaging, DRM, whatever you need, we're on offer for that. And I think that's true across a lot of different CDNs and service providers. So.
And I also feel it's really important to keep it simple, the architecture. As complicated as it is, if you can really have a simple architecture, the most simple way, at the end when you scale, when things don't get too complicated, you can scale easier.
Perfect. Well, guys, we're running out of time. If you have any more questions, we can take it on the side. We'll surrender you, and we'll make sure we answer all your questions. So if you have more questions, please come on the side of the stage. We'll be more than happy to talk to you guys. And we'll cut the live stream for now. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much for our panelists. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you.